everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to have some friends visiting with us today to talk about the Quantitative Reasoning ILO, which has had an upgrade. So we're just going to kind of go through these slides here just to let you know what our purpose is for this. And we thought that it'd be best, as you've all had the opportunity to kind of take a look at it, to kind of give you a quick little how to get at it, and then maybe check in and see where each individual is in any questions they have so far. How does that sound for everyone? We are the members of your quantitative reasoning team, and you can feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions as well. Our goal of this community of practice, again, was to answer questions, share information. We'd also love to at some point create a collection of sample assignments, and then just talk about good practices. So we understand what our quantitative reasoning, ultimately, these are our outcomes. And what we want to do is connect you, like I said, to the assignment. So let's keep going. I'm looking at the dimensions. One of the approaches that we had, and Steph, if you could go forward one step, great. So you want to review the criterions, and some people have like two different approaches. Some people start Covey style begin with the end in mind. They find a rubric that works for them, and then they figure out which of the criterion fits the objectives of that specific assignment, okay? Other people are going to create assignments to fit the criterion. So I wanted to kind of jump here to help you understand that you need to determine what your start point is going to be. Are you starting at the beginning and creating an assignment to fit it, or are you starting at the end and figuring out which one fits your assignment? Some faculty, as they're going through the information, will find that they don't have any assignments that fit. That's kind of an unusual situation, especially in the disciplines that quantitative versus qualitative, qualitative versus quantitative. But we've also figured out ways that things that are perceived sometimes as qualitative can be quantitative, right? Spaghetti. I just had spaghetti of the words there. So we wanted to give you some examples. These are obviously quantitative. So this is like your lab reports, exams, math calculations, word problems, taking a self-assessment of physical activity levels, and then kind of analyzing the data and making a plan. So say you're in, physical therapy, right? We can assess the athlete's performance and then create that plan. That's, accessing data to be able to figure out how you're going to make the bridge and grow that individual, okay? Students attending like the Adulting 101 create a plan for like finances, right? So that's all data driven. What's my budget and how am I going to make my budget work with the following bills that I have in place? All right. Now, did you also know, and we talked about this a lot to try to figure out, especially when we're looking at, say, a nutrition class, right? For example, since we got Stephanie in the space. So what about a situation where, and I love this, Seth, maybe you can jump in here with your example of how you looked at data to analyze restaurants and nutrition, or maybe it was sales. It was so great.
Yeah, and I can kind of touch upon it a little bit later, but I in a graduate school class that I had taken years ago, there was an app called Foursquare that people would leave comments like "great vibe" or "the pastries are amazing." So I was really into coffee houses where I do a lot of my work. So I went to a number of locally owned coffee houses, and I looked at all of the comments that people posted in the social media app about these coffee houses, and I just did field research, and I sort of quantified. I took this sort of qualitative data and I applied it to a quantitative model. I looked at comments that refer to the food or the product or the people or community that went to those coffee houses, or the vibe, or some other sort of qualitative qualities. And I interpreted them in a quantitative sense, so I could show a correlation between the kinds of comments that were left for these coffee houses to be able to determine or infer the kind of community or people that frequented those coffee houses.
Does anyone else have an example of that, perhaps? We've got some examples here around how students leverage and look at a before and after of engaging in a campus resource. So, what did your resume look like before you access career services? And then How did you use the feedback that you were given to update it? And then what was the feedback you got after that? We also looked at some more obviously quantitative things like allied health, clinical documentation, or a pharmacology assignment, skills or practicum checkoff. So that would be like massage or dental, right? That would be also a really great example. Concept maps, care plans. I love concept maps for like patho and biology or anatomy and physiology. Patho really more than anything, but they all apply. And then we also looked at data like the social determinants of health or cultural beliefs and practices. And then we can also use qualitative assessment or the criterion for quantitative. I keep saying qualitative, I apologize. To actually look at a care protocol and where it's connected to data, right? So what does the NIH say about this care protocol? Or, what does, the CDC say about, what communities are at risk for what things, right? Things like wellness. And we've got the pleasure of Anil in the space, so I'll let him talk about biology real quick.
So when I teach bio, it's really for nursing majors. So I might sound like another person from the nursing department. Sorry, but we look at blood work, white blood cells, and things like that. We have fictitious patients, and the students have to look at the blood work and interpret what's wrong with the patient based off the blood work. We'll even do that with like some hormone levels, where we'll look at hormones that come from blood work and try to figure out what's going on with it. So we're looking at data and coming up with a result from it. So we do a couple of experiments like that. But anytime we're in the lab, we're always kind of collecting data and then using that data. So we kind of tuck it pretty neatly under quantitative for that. But I think a lot of the examples that we're giving are mostly from bio because Marilyn and I are here, so sorry about that. But there's so many things that can kind of tuck into this. Anytime that you have a student looking at some kind of data and making some kind of judgment from it, I think it tuck it pretty well onto this ILO.
Mm-hmm. Next slide.
All right. Well, since we're all jumping in, I know that you know me as a grants person on campus, but my other hat that I wear is teaching English at college, and I haven't taught for a while. But when I was adjuncting, I would incorporate these kinds of assessments into my assignments, and so here I'm getting more of a social sciences or humanities aspect to integrating quantitative approaches. And as Marilyn had said, one approach is to sort of take the assignment that you have and then try to retrofit that as one strategy for assessing quantitative skills. So just to orient ourselves, because I will and can do this kind of approach, or I may have already done that, and so now I just want to take an assignment that I may have assessed under a previous ILO and bring that forward to the new ILO. Just off to the right on the slide is sort of the crosswalk to where our current ILOs maybe lived previously. So with these ILOs, there's the matrix that we showed at the very beginning of mastery and proficiency, all the way down to like no assignments submitted. Students are moving along this continuum of moving toward mastery, and so we're just trying to get them as far along this pathway as we can, based on the assignment that we have. What semester they're in class. Am I in an English 101 class, teaching an English 101 class, or am I teaching an English 2.0 something class? That might determine where I'm aiming for the students on this continuum of mastery. So each of these criterion and dimensions, generally have the same sort of profile, developing versus proficiency or mastery. Now, how they're represented in actual terms, for example, communication or representation of quantitative information, that mastery level off to the right is correctly expresses quantitative data symbolically, graphically, or in written oral form. So, I'll use these guideposts, whether it's the mastery or proficiency level, whichever one I'm aiming for with a particular assignment, to sort of derive those qualities that I want to build into the assignment, or make sure that are represented, so that it evokes those outcomes or deliverables that I want for the student. So here's an example, or some preliminary, preliminary approach to how I would break down these mastery levels into what I'm going to need or want the students to do with an assignment. So for that first dimension, I want to see that they've accurately represented quantitative information. I want to see that they were effective at selecting the appropriate information or the optimal information. And so I would do that for each one. Now, there's obviously many different kinds of assignments. Here's just sort of a fun, fanciful one. If I was wanting them to do a persuasive paper about, like what's better for mental, emotional health, having a cat in the house or having a dog in the house. I could say, make an argument about does owning one or the other correlate with better mental health outcomes. And even though this isn't a science class, this can be an argument that they're making. So this is a persuasive essay is just a classic English 101. This is something that you could use in English 101. And the same kind of template which shows up in an English 101 shows up in a history class or a humanities class, or so it can be adapted to different sort of courses or curriculum. So what then I'm looking for, or what I'm looking for to build into the assignment, to evaluate the assignment, to guide the students are these sort of qualities under the dimensions, like representation, effectiveness, contextualization. And again, I'm not looking at all of these, but I'm just using these as options, directions that I can go in developing that assignment. So we'll just take these one dimension at a time. So for communication or representation, quantitative information, when we're looking at when I'm looking at representation, I'm wanting to know if the students are bringing forward relevant and important information. My mom used to always say, it's not what they tell you that matters, it's what they don't tell you. And students have to be able to determine out of this information that they have to go and get for these assignments, what is it that is not relevant, and what it is, and is the information, sort of accurately presented. So, Mark Twain used to say there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And what he was saying is that you can take this information and you can present it in a way that that wins your argument, but you may not be ethically or accurately representing this information. And so, we want to see students demonstrate that they are thoughtful, ethical, intentional about bringing forward quantitative information, that they can demonstrate it. With regard to effectiveness or selecting appropriate information, many of us have got masters and PhD degrees. We're not asking our students to do a lit review, but what we do want them to do is be able to demonstrate that they have done a lit review of sorts. If they're bringing forward information, we want them to be able to demonstrate that they know enough to be trusted, someone who's an authority, someone we can trust, that we know that they're bringing forward the right information on some level. So they need to be able to demonstrate that, so that we're not wondering what did they leave out. So moving down to analysis of quantitative information. With regard to like contextualization, they've got this quantitative information that they're processing. We want to make sure that they are able to demonstrate that they can situate that information, effectively or accurately, to demonstrate that they have digested this information and they've analyzed the quantitative data to determine if it's relevant or not relevant. In terms of representation, can they demonstrate that they understand what is being communicated? They've read information, they've read quantitative information, now they're bringing it forward. The question is, are they bringing it forward as a communicator, or are they bringing it forward as a messenger who's bringing forward a sealed envelope who doesn't know what's inside of it? So this is a way to be able to help students demonstrate and for you to assess that. Moving down to the dimension of application and quantitative models. With regards to like surveys and information gathering, in the case in this example, they're asserting an argument, they're making a persuasive argument. Have they demonstrated the ability to identify the new information that they need to get? Have they been able to identify the tools or the tactics that they're going to use to collect that information? And so that's an aspect of an assignment that can give them the opportunity to demonstrate that skill. And then further down with field work, I kind of use that example with the coffee houses. Are they able? Is the assignment set up in a way for them to be able to demonstrate that they're using skillful means to collect and gather that information, and that they're doing it, in a way that sort of builds to their argument, allows them to be persuasive. Anyway, so I think I'm just sort of trailing on that point. But these are just several different approaches to an assignment that's not, or a class that maybe isn't directly a quantitative class, but more of a literature, humanities, social sciences class. But to be able to craft an assignment or adapt an assignment that does require students to be persuasive or to argue or to somehow demonstrate that they are subject matter experts, and to have part of the assignment be ones in which they have to demonstrate these certain skills that show up or correlate with these dimensions.
Awesome stuff. Thank you. I'll cover the next one for Ty. All right. So Ty teaches history, and so he brought forward this example of how you can utilize data analysis to bring information forward for an in-class discussion. So in this case, he asked the students to look at the 1867 Voter Registration Act, and then they use that information to have the conversation in class. For those that teach online classes, it could be the data that they're bringing forward to conduct the discussion question. Okay, so this required the students to interpret quantitative data and draw conclusions, and then they had to correctly express it in a written form so that they could present their findings. So the act of organizing the information also is a part of the quantitative approach. And Anil shares, if you could please feel free to reach out if you need help. Thanks everyone for meeting with us.